Morning, everyone. How's your morning going? I'm super excited and happy to be here and talking about Azure Data Factory. And before I get started, I wanted to really thank you all for beating your early morning blues. I know this is the first session of the day, and hope you are going to take a lot of key learnings from here about Azure Data Factory. And I feel really privileged to be here talking about Data Factory today, given all the important announcements and launches that we had yesterday. In this session, myself, Anand Subbaraj, I'm the Group Product Manager of Azure Data Factory. I have with me Gaurav Malhotra, Senior Product Manager of Azure Data Factory. And we are going to take you through a tour of Azure Data Factory and talk about the different integrations and new capabilities of Azure Data Factory. As you all know, we have launched a number of new capabilities in the last several months. And yesterday was a very important milestone for us, where we have introduced some of the most critical and strategic capabilities in Azure Data Factory. In this session, we are going to walk you through some of these new capabilities of Azure Data Factory through the lens of a customer scenario. But before I get started, go into the next few slides, I just wanted to do a fact check, asking you a few questions. How many of you are familiar with Azure Data Factory? Great. And how many of you are using Azure Data Factory? Great to see those hands. Thank you so much. Let's get started. Azure Data Factory V2 was announced in general availability about 12 months back. And the last 12 months has been significant for us with great adoption. And I want to start with this slide by showcasing some of these metrics that highlights the significant, enormous adoption that we had in the last little while. Azure Data Factory is used by 60% of Fortune 500 organizations, and we are moving about 20 petabytes of data a month with Azure Data Factory. And these are some of the metrics there. For those of you who are not very familiar with Azure Data Factory, this is just a reminder slide of what Azure Data Factory is. Azure Data Factory is the most collaborative and hybrid data integration service in Azure, offering code-free ETL and ELT capabilities. And these are some of the key features of Azure Data Factory. Number one, it enables organizations to perform data movement and data transformation at scale. And I'm going to use one of the slides to talk in details about what this capability is and what new features we are bringing in this particular capability. Number two, Azure Data Factory enables organizations to operationalize and orchestrate pipelines across a hybrid environment. Number three, author and monitor. This is an area where we are investing heavily on our tooling. In the last little while, we have made new announcement that enables data engineers to create, author, monitor, manage these pipelines at scale, completely code-free, maintenance-free, using the visual authoring experience. And for data engineers who wants to write code, we have rich programmatic surface area and SDKs in Python, Java, .NET that enables organizations to create these pipelines, manage, monitor at scale with their code. Last but not the least, it enables organizations to lift and shift SQL Server integration services into cloud. As you all may be aware, SQL Server integration services is our on-premises data integration offering. And we are talking to lots of customers who are telling us that they have thousands of SSIS packages. They do not want to manage the infrastructure for running those packages. And with Azure Data Factory, especially in the V2, we enable organizations to lift and shift those packages and run that in cloud. What we are going to do here is talk about some of the modern data engineering scenarios based on the learnings with the engagement from the customers. And the first one, you may have already seen this many times. This is what we call as modern data warehouse. You may have seen this, listened various different formats of this particular slide. But the idea here is that the key takeaway is that organizations are trying to migrate from traditional data workloads into what is called as modern data warehouse and modernizing these data workloads. It involves ingestion of data from various locations, shapes, sizes, and form into a storage that supports data at volume, variety, and velocity. Once you have the data in that storage, you want to prepare transform, and enrich to serve for rich enterprise analytics and providing access-rich reports to your business users. Azure Data Factory can be used to ingest data at scale in this particular pattern, and once the data is ingested, now with the new capabilities that we announced in Azure Data Factory, you can prepare, transform, enrich at scale with no code. For organizations who have data engineers who wants to write code, you can continue to use Azure Databricks Notebook, or you can also use some of the other capabilities that we provide to run those code at scale to prepare, transform, and enrich the data. This is a slight variation from the previous scenario. We are also working with lots of customers who have data-driven SaaS applications. These applications provide personalized experience to their customers and provide additional capabilities to these customers. But these data applications, they also have a tier that requires exactly the same pattern that you saw before. It requires ingestion of data from various sources, landing that into a storage that has capability of holding those data at scale, then prepare, transform, but here serving the data for your applications rather than for your enterprise. And Azure Data Factory here works exactly the same way for data ingestion, preparation, transformation, and enrichment, and then finally serving in the Cosmos layer to serve the applications. Now, what we wanted to do is, for the next few minutes, use one of the customer scenario of a wide world importer. It's a fictitious customer who is using a smart, modern application to improve their business by providing omnichannel customer engagement. To do this, the organization requires to ingest and transform data from a wide variety of different sources, analyze that at scale to derive rich business insights. The goal here is to improve shopping cart size so that organization can drive sales and more revenue. Now, what I'm going to do is, in the next few slides, talk about the building blocks of this particular solution, and then Gaurav is going to come over and show a live demo of this particular solution. Now, if I have to double-click on this particular solution, to offer an omnichannel customer engagement, a retailer needs to ingest data from a variety of different sources. It includes the web clickstream data from mobile and web logs, point of sale data that you see here, customer data, product data, and in some cases, beacon data from inside the store, so that all these data can be transformed, enriched to get rich business insights, and also offering additional capability, personalized capability to the customers so that they have best experience, whether they're walking in store or they are in their website purchasing products. The first step in this particular solution is to ingest data from a wide variety of different sources. These sources could be enterprise sources, public sources, and land that data into an Azure Lake so that it can be used for further processing and transformation. Azure Data Factory offers enterprise-grade connectivity with the best price performance, best throughput, and best capabilities in the market today. Azure Data Factory currently has 80+ connectors, and we are adding new connectors every month. And these connectors are Microsoft created, Microsoft managed, and Microsoft serviced. We have seen some of the competitors who claim hundreds of connectors, but when you go look into them in details, you'd find there are a handful of connectors which are first-class supported, and the rest of the connectors are either community-driven or customers have to create that with the extensibility of the product. But here, we are providing all these connectors as first-class capability in the product. Recently, one of our largest retail customer, they moved about 10 petabytes of data in one single job at throughputs of over 2 GB per second from S3 into Azure. And this was not seen before, heard before, several months back. The data movement service is available in 24 points of presence, and it enables organization to not just connect to the cloud sources, but also on-premises sources, SaaS applications, and so forth. Once the data is ingested, the next step is to prepare and transform the data at scale. One of the key learnings from our customer interaction is that 85% of organizations are looking into code-free visual transformation because organizations are finding it hard to hire the right data engineers with the right Spark Python skill set. And to address this requirement, we are launching a bunch of new capabilities that you may have already seen yesterday. Mapping data flow in public preview and wrangling data flow in private preview. Mapping data flow enables organizations to perform known schema to known schema mapping through various transformations that we are offering. These transformations enable organizations to process data, enrich data, perform data quality steps at scale visually with no code. These transformations are running on a Spark distribution, and at this point in time, we are supporting Azure Databricks as the Spark environment. And over the course of time, the goal is to support other Spark distributions. All these are running in fully managed and serverless manner. We manage the infrastructure and use this transformation code in a highly optimized manner for maximized performance and longer shelf life for the work that is done. With wrangling data flow, we are embedding PowerBI data flow into Azure Data Factory to serve the personas or the users who require self-service data preparation and data wrangling. And again, this happens at scale on a Spark environment. The goal here is to take big data to the masses and democratize so that organizations do not require those Spark experts to perform data transformation and enrichment. And Gaurav is going to show some cool demos of how you can really leverage some of these capabilities into your data integration solution. Once you have the data prepared, processed, transformed, the next step is to load that into Enterprise Data Warehouse. Here I'm on Azure SQL Data Warehouse Gen 2. This is the most performant, secured, and the best cloud scale DW in the market today. Recently, GigaHome published an independent study which showcased Azure SQL DW to be 14x faster and 94% cheaper than any other alternatives in the market today. And to raise the bar, SQL DW has recently announced JSON support that enables organizations to model and serve not just relational data, but also unstructured, semi-structured data at scale. Azure Data Factory data flow currently has first-class integration with SQL DW. It enables organizations to load data into DW, leverages Polybase to load at cloud scale, and also supports various loading patterns like insert, update, upsert, and other patterns that enables you to load the data once processed into DW right from the data flow. Now, once you have your pipeline set, you want to orchestrate and operationalize this pipeline at scale. Azure Data Factory provides industry-leading orchestration at cloud scale. How many of you are familiar with Airflow? Great. So if you're familiar with Airflow, Airflow is the best open source orchestration out there. Azure Data Factory goes one step up and provides better orchestration and operationalization capability than Airflow in a fully managed and serverless manner. Enables organizations to orchestrate operationalized pipeline across on-premises and cloud environment, as I said, in a fully managed and code-free manner. Now, once you have created this pipeline, orchestrated and operationalized, the next step is to monitor, manage that at scale. Azure Data Factory offers best-in-class monitoring and management capabilities. You can monitor, manage the pipeline using the same experience. You can look into the history of pipeline runs, activity runs, and use the rich query capabilities that we offer to query the runs, whether they're happening at a pipeline level or at the activity level. We offer operational lineage that enables you to see the chaining of pipelines and figure out where an error happens. We also have first-class integration with Azure Monitoring Service. Azure Monitor Service is the infrastructure in Azure that enables all these services to publish their monitoring events so that it can be used by organization to pull these events and use that for other tools like Splunk or Grafana and other tools that organizations are leveraging. We publish all the events that you see in our experience, including diagnostics and metrics so that you can create alerts using Azure Monitor Service. We have also recently added a new capability wherein you can restate activities within a pipeline. Earlier, you had to restate the entire pipeline in case a failure happened. We heard back from lots of our customers saying it's extremely difficult to restate an entire pipeline, and we now allow you to restate from an activity within a pipeline. So assume you have 20 activities in a pipeline, and say 5th activity has failed, and you can go into that particular activity and restate that rather than restating the entire pipeline. Templates is another feature that we have released in the last few months. We have got a lot of learnings based on the customer discussions. These learnings are best practices, tips to create these pipelines and operationalize them. Now with templates, what we are doing is we are encoding these pipelines best practices as Data Factory templates so that organizations can use them to be more productive on day 0. On day 0, you do not have to start on an empty canvas. You can use these templates and best practices to start creating your pipelines. At this point in time, these are first-party templates, and over course of time, we are going to open this for third-party and other partners to publish their templates. But now, organizationally, you can have your own templates, you can publish those templates, and you can have other data engineers use those templates and get started in a productive manner on the pipelines. Now, once this pipeline is built, your pipeline is ingesting, preparing, transforming, processing the data, loading into enterprise DW. You can serve that to your business users using PowerBI. Now it's time for some demo. Welcoming Gaurav on the stage.
Thank you. I hope everyone can hear me. So I'm just going to quickly do a swap here. All right, so what I'm going to be doing for next 20-25 minutes is to show you an end-to-end demo on how you can build this retail omnichannel customer presence scenario and give the best-in-class customer experience. So for that, everything starts with Azure Portal. So this is one-stop shop for all your Azure services. So here I have provisioned a Data Factory. And I'm sure like most of you raised your hands where you're familiar with Data Factory. The only thing that I want to mention is that now when you provision a Data Factory, we have also enabled for customers to enable a Git configuration right there. So you can create your Data Factory and you can back up your entire Data Factory with a Git repo to do source control, versioning, collaboration, continuous integration, and deployment. So once you have provisioned a Data Factory over here, I have already one provision, so I'm just going to go over there. You'll get a blade like this, and here there's some monitoring information, and this is the author and monitor tile which will launch the user experience. So once you click this, it launches our web-based ID, which allows, as Anand mentioned, to build your ETL or ELT workflows. So this is the overview page. It has some quick actions for you to get started. It has some videos for you to listen about different features that we keep on launching, and we keep on adding videos for that. You can look at release notes for everything that we keep on releasing. We add a section over here so that it can give you the link to the documentation, to the blog announcement for that. So once you're on this page, you can create a pipeline to get started. So this is a blank canvas. You have your resource explorer over here. And then here, this is your activity toolbox where you can drag and drop activities and build your data integration workflows in a code-free manner. So as Anand mentioned, for this particular scenario, the first step is to ingest data into the lake. So here I have a data ingestion pipeline, where as you can see that I'm ingesting data from a bunch of sources into the lake. So I have clickstream data coming in from Amazon S3. I have my products data coming in from SAP. I have my customer data coming in from Dynamics, and the location data from in-store beacons and online customer behavior through an HTTP location. So I'm ingesting all of these into the lake, and these are live data ingestion activities. So today we support 80+ connectors, as Anand mentioned, and you can easily add those by just clicking this plus new data set. And here we have support for on-prem connectors. So if you have an on-prem Oracle database, you could do that. If you have any SaaS source, you could use Salesforce. All the Azure sources are available over here for you to use. And we keep on adding new sources over here every month. So once you have selected your source, and this is all serverless, right? So you just come in, select the source. You just say, this is my source and destination. So if I were to look at the Dynamics one, you can see that I just specify my source. I have a query that I'm running. I can look at the sink. I can do quick previews of the data to do sanity checks to see what I'm ingesting. And once I have done this, right, what we also enable for you is to do different settings on it, right? So you can essentially come and say that I want to define the degree of parallelism. So by default, it's auto because we try to give you, based on the connector that you have chosen, we give you the best performance by knowing from previous workloads what is the best thing to select over here. But you as a customer know your data better. So in case you want to say that throw more parallelism at it, you can come here and select this. It's totally a choice that we've enabled for you as customers. What we have also done in the last month is that we've enabled incremental data capabilities over here. So now if you want to move data incrementally based on last modified time, it's all supported with this data ingestion capability that we have in Data Factory. So once you have ingested the data in the lake, the next step, as Anand mentioned, is to prep the data. So now I have a data prep pipeline where I have a wrangling data flow activity. So this is the new capability that we announced yesterday in limited preview. And you can see that I have a wrangling data flow activity on the canvas. And the way I got this is you can just drag a data flow activity. At that point, it asks you whether you want a mapping or a wrangling data flow, or you could choose an existing data flow that you have created. So in this case, I have chosen a wrangling data flow activity. So if I double click it, it's going to open up my wrangling data flow. So if I just full screen it, just to show you what's happening over here. So what we have done over here, how many of you guys are familiar with Power Query Online? Great. So this is nothing but we have embedded the Power Query Online experience inside Data Factory to give you the best-in-class data preparation capabilities. So this is the familiar mashup editor that you guys have used multiple times. If you're using Excel, if you're using PowerBI data flows, it's the same mashup editor. So whatever I'm doing over here is actually generating M query. So how many of you are familiar with M? Okay, so this is the M query that is getting generated as you continue to wrangle. And what we are doing is we are going to take this M, translate it into Spark, and run it over big data Spark distribution for you. As Anand mentioned, the first Spark distribution that we are supporting is Azure Databricks. But over a period of time, we have plans to add support for other computes as well. So here, what happened was that when I configured this wrangling data flow, I gave the Data Factory data sets to it. So I provided that I have an account and an account owner data set, and I wanted to join these and shape this to get the average discount percentage. So basically, I'm preparing the data so that I can use it for transformation downstream. So I've selected my source data set over here, and when I selected that, it loaded those data sets into this mashup editor. And now I'm ready to wrangle. So you can see the steps that I've applied over here on the right-hand side. So if I right-click this and just to show you what are these steps, here I'm doing a simple join between these two. It's an inner join, and I just have selected the column. So it's, again, code-free. You just are selecting what you want to do. So I've selected these two columns to do an inner join. Then I've removed some columns over here. Once I did the join, I got the discount percentage. So I just expanded that column, and then I just renamed them columns so that I can get this sort of shape. So now I'm ready to use this data downstream for my transformation activities. So here, there are a bunch of things you can use. You can apply those transformations, shape your data to make sure that it is ready for transformation downstream. So once I have now prepped the data, and one thing before I move ahead, when you are doing development, we are essentially using this grid style, and every time you apply a transformation, we query the Power Query Online service to give you the output right there. So it's an interactive grid style experience as you're applying transformations. But when you are ready to run this on scale and you have this data prep activity, so this is where you come in and say that, I know that the whole workload for which I want to do this data preparation is going to be general purpose, or it is going to be memory optimized. In future, we are going to enable compute optimized as well, and select that type of compute type and select the nodes as well over here. So you can say that I want to choose 4, 16, 32 and provide that specification to us. And in the backend, we're going to create that Spark infrastructure to run this data preparation for you. Again, as Anand mentioned, it's completely managed. You are not in the business of managing clusters. We are going to create those clusters. We are going to run these. We're going to scale them up and down for you and give you the best-in-class performance. So once you have prepped the data, the next step for you is to transform the data. So here, now I'm using the mapping data flow activity, which is the second data flow that we announced in public preview as yesterday. So this is my sales analytics data flow activity that I have. So if I double click this, it opens up the data flow canvas. So this is the known schema to known schema mapping that Anand mentioned. So here, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to do codeless transformations. So now I want to look at the sales trends. So I'm joining my account sales transaction data with account information. And you can see that I've just selected the join type over here. It's all simple clicks. We are doing all the heavy lifting for you guys. And you are just selecting a column over here. So the entire schema is available for you to look at and do inspect. At every stage, so if you look at this, you have a source. So in this case, this is the source. You have a bunch of transformations, and I can add a sink, which I'll show you in the next step. So you can add any transformation by clicking this plus sign. So we have a bunch of these transformations available out of the box for you. So you can do a join, split, lookup, derived column, surrogate key, exist. All of those are available out of the box for you. So once you do this transformation, you can do quick data previews to do sanity checks at each step. And you can look at those data previews to see how your data is shaping up after every transformation that you continue to apply. And we show you statistics to see how much data was inserted, updated, deleted. So all of that is available out of the box for you. The one thing that we are doing with mapping data flow is that we are trying to support all the common data integration patterns out of the box for you. So if you have data coming in and you know that there's going to be schema drift where new columns keep on getting added to your data, there are out of the box capability over here. We could just check this box to say allow schema drift. Now, if any new column gets added, and you don't want your data integration workflow to be affected, it will not get affected, and we'll take care of that for you. Not only that, you can also come and say, I want to define a pattern. I want to use an expression language to say that anything that starts with C1 or C2, that's going to be my column name, and only use that and reject all the other columns. We can do that for you using our rich expression language support over here as well. So here, once you have essentially transformed the data, you could essentially specify complex partitioning schemes for your data as well. So you could say, I want to optimize my data loading partitioning schemes, and you can use the current partitioning or a single partitioning, or you can set partitioning schemes, and we will again do all that heavy lifting. Again, it's a few simple clicks. We are trying to take away all that pain that you have in writing code for achieving all of this and doing all that heavy lifting ourselves. So now I have essentially transformed my data for different insights that I want to gain from the data. The next step for me is to load the data into my warehouse. And again, as Anand mentioned, that from the data flow, you can load the data to your warehouse. So let's say I have generated these sales trends and I wanted to load it to my DW. So I can just click plus over here and say I want to sync the data. And in this sync, I can essentially go, I already have created a trends DW data set, which is pointing to a DW table over here. And now I'm ready to sync the data. And you'll see that there's an auto mapping that has happened. And not only we have done the auto mapping, we are actually also highlighting that there are some columns that are duplicate over there and that this requires to be fixed. So you can disable the auto mapping over here. You can either rename these to the other column names or just delete these that I don't want these columns in the destination, and just keep on doing it to make sure that it's essentially a valid sync with all the options, and then you're ready to move the data. So not only that, as we were mentioning earlier, we are using Polybase here to parallelly load the data at scale for you, and we support a bunch of patterns like upsert, insert. We can create the table if the table does not exist in the DW. We can truncate the table at every time when you run this workflow. So all of those options are available out of the box for you. So now that I have ingested the data, prepped the data, transformed the data, and loaded the data into my data warehouse, now I need to combine all of this into a data integration pipeline. So here I have a sales analytics pipeline where all those individual steps that I showed you, I've combined them into a single data integration pipeline. So these are my data ingestion activities. On success, I want to do the data prep. If any of it fails, I want to send a failure email. If this succeeds, the data prep succeeds, I want to do sales analytics data flow, where I'm transforming the data in a code-free manner at scale, and essentially loading my data into the warehouse from that data flow as well. So one thing I want to point out over here, and I just want to reiterate because it's a very important point, that with these code-free capabilities, we are trying to do two things, right? We are first trying to make sure that you guys can focus on business logic rather than learning Spark if you don't want to. And the second one is that we are giving you a longer shelf life for your solutions, because now the Spark versions keep on changing, so you have to update your Python code, Scala code to get the best-in-class performance with the latest versions. But with these managed capabilities, we are going to do all that for you. We'll make sure that you get the best-in-class performance. We'll make sure that you can use the best-in-class capabilities with the latest version that is available. But as a customer, we are also enabling for you a choice on the platform. So you can choose to say, I want to do all of this code-free, or you can come in and say that, no, I do not like code-free. I essentially want to do this in a code manner, and I want to essentially write code for it. So this is exactly the same pipeline that I have, that I just showed you, but now instead of me using the wrangling data flow for doing data prep and the mapping data flow for doing the transformation, I'm using Databricks notebooks where I have written my Python code to do this. So this is the notebook that I have over here. It's the exact same thing that I did in the data flow code-free, but here I chose to write 400 lines of code. So totally a choice as a customer, as a developer you have on what path you like. So once I have done that, now I have created, now that I have created my pipeline, I'm ready to do iterative development and debugging. So I can essentially now put breakpoints over here and say that I want to debug this. And this is another thing that I want to mention, that with Data Factory, you can parameterize the crap out of it, which means every property that you have is parameterizable. So here, what I'm doing is that I have parameterized the sales transaction buckets in Amazon S3, which I'm providing the values on the fly. And you can use our rich expression language to craft these values as well. So imagine you have data in a partition in sales in your Amazon S3 bucket, and you want to run every day for that partition. So you can use the datetime functions in our expression language to craft that partition, so that every day when the pipeline runs is going to resolve to that date time partition, take that data and just work on that data. So that's how all these capabilities are available out of the box, and you can do it incrementally for every day. So here I can say finish, and at that point we are doing debug run over here. An important difference between a debug run and a triggered run is that with debug run, you can essentially add a new activity over here, and you still haven't published to your Data Factory, but you can essentially debug it to make sure that it works end-to-end before it affects your production workflow or your dev or your test workflow. So you could do that. So here, The runs are in progress. As you can see that my data ingestion activities are already succeeding because I'm moving a very low amount of data over here. But these are live throughput, live things that we are showcasing you in terms of data movement on how much throughput you got, how much peak connections we made from that store to the destination, from the source store to the destination store, how much time the data was in queue. So all of those things are available out of the box for you. And this keeps on refreshing as the data movement is in progress, and you can see the live data ingestion that's happening. So now I have essentially built my pipeline. I have essentially done iterative development and debugging. I'm ready to run this on a cadence or an event, which means I'm ready to put a trigger on top of this pipeline. So I can essentially say add trigger, and I can essentially choose from the different trigger types that we have available. So you can use a schedule type trigger, which is now to future. And you could use a tumbling window trigger, which allows you to go in the past and do backfills as well. Or you can use an event-based trigger to say that if my file lands in blob, I want to kick off a pipeline. If my file lands in ADLS store, I want to kick off a pipeline. You could do all of that with this triggering capabilities. Now, once I have triggered my pipeline, I'm ready to monitor that end to end. So you can essentially use our rich monitoring capabilities to do that. So this is the monitoring interface that we have. It's a simple list view based interface where every row is a pipeline run, and you can dive deeper into that to look at the activity runs corresponding to that. So you have the pipeline runs, and let's say for this sales analytics pipeline that we ran, if we wanted to dive deeper and look at what are the activities that ran for this, and not only that, what was the definition of my pipeline for which this execution took place, you can look at that diagram view over here as well. In this case, everything ran successfully. You can look at all these activities, how much time it took, when it was started, and not only that, you can look at detailed monitoring for our data flows as well. Now, this is a cool feature that we have where for different data flows, we can tell you exactly at every step how much data came in, how much data went out, how many columns were processed, dropped, what was the partitioning information, the skewness, kurtosis. All of that information is available for you to look at with very detailed monitoring capabilities that we have out of the box in Data Factory. So now that I have monitored my pipeline, I can essentially look at different views. So I can look at dashboards to quickly look at how many pipelines succeeded, a top-level view to just look at how many pipelines succeeded, failed, and we are working very hard to add more dashboarding capabilities here as well so that you can debug your failures very easily. Because that's one of the top feedback that we have been receiving from you guys, where you want more capabilities to know that if a failure happens, why did it happen, and if you had 2 pipelines running in 2 days and the performance was different, you want those comparison features to see why one took 1 hour, another took 10 minutes. So we are working on adding those comparison features over here as well. You can also, as a customer, if you do not, no one wants to monitor their pipelines like a hummingbird. They essentially want to go and create alerts so that if any time a failure happens, they can be notified for that. So here we have full integration with Azure alerting infrastructure. So you can essentially come and create an alert rule, and you can say that I want an email notification or an SMS or a push notification. So all of those capabilities are available out of the box. And this alerting capability is based on our integration with Azure Monitor. So all the metrics that we publish can be used to create alerts as well. In addition to that, once you pump your data via Azure Monitor to log analytics, you can create customized alerts as well. So you can say that for this pipeline in last 1 hour, if something failed, I want to raise an alert. So you can use that Kusto language to create your alerts and raise those as well. So now that I have monitored the pipeline, the last step was to gain insights into the data, right? So I have here a PowerBI dashboard, which is hooked up to my data warehouse. And here, because of the massive scale or DW that I have, a bunch of PowerBI analysts can essentially connect to these PowerBI reports in a concurrent fashion and gain those insights into the data. So very quickly, if I were to recap, what we saw today was ability on how you can use Data Factory to ingest data at scale in a serverless fashion from different sources, how you can prep the data using wrangling data flow, which is in preview. So we have a link which we can share with you on how to become part of that preview. Then how you can use the mapping data flow to do code-free transformation at scale, how you can load your data warehouse from the mapping data flow, and then how you can essentially, from your data warehouse, power the serving layer, which is PowerBI dashboards, to gain rich, intelligent insights into the data. Back to you, Anand, for the progress and the roadmap information. Thank you.
Thanks, Gaurav. That was a great demo. Lots of stuff we have showed here in this session, but you also have recording for each one of the features that we showed today. And Gaurav is the guy who has been recording all these awesome videos, and you would see him presenting each one of these features independently. Now, what I wanted to talk a little bit is the lift and shift capability that I touched upon earlier in the presentation. A lot of our customers are telling us that they have SSIS packages on premises, and they do not want to be in the business of managing the infrastructure. So with Azure Data Factory V2, we have added this capability of lifting and shifting the SSIS packages in the cloud. The best thing here is that organizations can continue to use the same tooling that they have been using on premises when they're lifting and shifting those packages in the cloud. And we provide the same capabilities, whether it's first-party components, third-party components, any partner-created components, they run seamlessly in the cloud. Now, with SQL Server 2008 end of life that is getting announced, I think the end of life is going to be in June. A lot of organizations are looking at migrating over those packages. And we have recently added a bunch of capabilities to make it super simple for organizations to lift and shift those packages, migrate over to the cloud. As we see the journey of an organization who have been doing on-premises ETL with SSIS packages, they want to first lift and shift those packages, and then once those packages are lift and shift, moved over to the cloud, they look into modernization. Now with Azure Data Factory and first-class integration with SSIS, with the SSIS activity, we are seeing organizations are creating these hybrid pipelines where parts of the pipelines are using the modern capabilities, and the rest of the pipeline continue to use SSIS activity and SSIS capabilities. And it's kind of best of both worlds. And we are going to continue investing heavily. We are investing on the partner ecosystem, where all SSIS top partners can continue to provide their capabilities with SSIS in the cloud. As we mentioned, we have done a lot of work, added a bunch of new features in the last 12 months. We have taken each one of the feedback that we are hearing from our customers, from our partners, and adding that as product capabilities in Azure Data Factory. Now, in the next little while, the next 6 months, 12 months, we wanted to invest on 3 key pillars. Data movement continues to be our key investment area. We want to improve the reliability, throughput, and continue adding new data stores, targets in data movement. Secondly, we have just launched the data transformation capabilities with mapping data flow and wrangling data flow. We are going to continue listening to the customer feedback and mature wrangling data flow and mapping data flow in the next little while. And the last major bucket is the security enhancements. A lot of our customers are telling us that they are using VNet in Azure so that they can create a private network and run these data integration and analytics solution. Azure Data Factory currently supports that topology using a self-hosted integration runtime. And over the course of next little while, we are going to bring in advanced capabilities so that you can continue to use the Azure integration runtime, which is fully serverless, managed in the same environment. And these are some of the feature level investments and strategic level investment. This is what you see here. We are going to bring streaming capabilities in Azure Data Factory. We are going to bring data catalog integration. This is, again, one of the top feature requests from our customers. We have Azure Data Catalog Gen 2 now. And with Azure Data Factory, we wanted to integrate with Catalog Gen 2 so that organizations can see lineage, search, discover the data sets that are created by these pipelines, publish that over to the catalog, and use that for discovery and reuse. And last but not the least, next year we are going to invest heavily on master data management in the cloud. Now with that, the key takeaway here is that Azure Data Factory is continuing to emerge as the best data integration platform in the cloud today. We are continuing to invest heavily to bring in new features and capabilities based on the feedback that we are hearing from our customer to continue in this journey. Thank you. Open to questions. Yes, please.
Do you mind coming to the mic and speaking up so that everyone can hear?
So all the metrics and events and data I saw on your monitoring dashboard, are they available via API or any other means to integrate with the third-party or other monitoring tools?
Absolutely. So to repeat the question, we have showed a lot of monitoring events and metrics. Through our experience, do we have APIs to get the same level of details from a monitoring purpose? Absolutely right. We have rich SDK. We have Python SDK, .NET SDK, Java SDK that can be used to leverage the same monitoring events that you see through our experiences. Not just that, as we also mentioned, all these metrics events and diagnostic events are published to Azure Monitor. So instead of pulling that through our APIs, you can also use a push model where we are pushing this into Azure Monitor, and you use Azure Monitor as a router to get that data into, like, say, a blob storage, or push that into other third-party monitoring applications like Grafana and other monitoring tools.
Yep.
Yes, on the SSIS lift and shift you talked about, how would you actually get your packages there? Are we talking about taking an entire SSIS on-prem server and shifting that to the cloud, or would we be taking individual packages and somehow migrating them? Could you talk a little bit about that?
Great question. So the question is, how do you think about SSIS lift and shift? Are you moving package by package or entire server, right? So here the way it works is like SSIS on-premises, you're running those packages against the one-box environment, the SQL Server environment. Now with lift and shift, we have this capability of SSIS integration runtime in Azure Data Factory. You provision the SSIS integration runtime, use an Azure SQL environment as the metadata store, and then you will point those SSIS packages against this environment SSIS integration runtime that you have created. So instead of running those packages against an one-box environment, you're running the same packages against the cloud.
Yep.
Repeating the question, how do you see data lineage in ADF? Can you publish all these information so that business can see the data lineage? As I mentioned, one of the investment areas is ADF integration with Azure Data Catalog Gen 2. Once that happens, all these data sets that are getting created by the pipelines are going to be published to the catalog so that business users can see the lineage. Now, at this point in time, we have operational lineage within Data Factory itself. So the pipelines that are getting created, the pipelines that are getting chained with other pipelines, you can see that operationally in the Data Factory experience. But for dataset lineage, when we enable the integration with Azure Data Catalog Gen 2, you'd be able to see that.
Yep.
It's a great question. I'm going to repeat that, and it's very, very important that we clarify this one. The question is, for the mapping data flow and wrangling data flow for code-free transformation, do you need to explicitly spin up the cluster and spin it down like what happens with SSIS? Now here, whatever you saw, the mapping data flow, wrangling data flow, it is executed on a Spark distribution, which is fully managed and serverless. You do not have to be in the business of managing those clusters, spinning up and spinning down. We are going to take care of spinning up those clusters, run the job once the job is executed, we spin them down, remove the clusters. But we are going to give you controls wherein you can have your time to live or allowed idle time. You can specify that in the configuration, and based on your configuration, we are going to manage the cluster.
Yeah, and you can also control, like, based on the workload, as I was mentioning while I was showcasing the demo, that you know that your workload could be memory intensive or it could be compute intensive. So those are the options that we are enabling for you to tell us, and based on that, we'll spin up the right size infrastructure in the backend for you to give you the best-in-class performance. And not only that, you can control the number of cores that you want us to spin up as well. But the clusters are managed by us, spin up by us, taken down by us, and all of that. Yeah.
Yes, please. Right. The question is it going to be similar to Databricks auto-scaling, right? So as I mentioned, at this point in time, the first Spark distribution that we are using is Azure Databricks, and we are going to bring in all the same capabilities of auto-scale of Databricks into here.
Can you talk more about the VNet support?
Great. The question here is, can you talk more about the VNet support? So as I mentioned today, in a VNet environment, you can use Azure Data Factory, but you need to use the self-hosted integration runtime to connect to the VNet environment. As a roadmap item, what we are working on is to enable Azure integration runtime in a fully managed and serverless manner in a VNet environment as well, so that you can use that in the same way like you're using any other publicly available public cloud connectors in the VNet environment as well.
So currently, I cannot use Data Factory in the express route within my VNet. Is that correct?
You can use Azure Data Factory, but you have to use a self-hosted integration runtime on a VM within the VNet.
In a VM environment.
Yes.
Got it.
Yes.
So
but it needs to be in the VNet. It can be scaled out, right? We are seeing some of the organizations, they have a similar challenge where they have VNet. They want to use Data Factory in a fully scale out manner like the Azure integration runtime. So what they are doing is using VMs in the VNet, and you can go up to 4 nodes, and you can still continue to use Azure Data Factory in a scaled out manner within those 4 nodes within the VNet environment.
So think of it as that right now you are managing those self-hosted integration runtimes inside the VNet, but once we release this enhanced VNet capabilities, we will do that for you, right? We will manage all of that scaling up of self-hosted IR and down for you.
I'm sorry, when should we expect that? End of this year?
Unfortunately, we do not reveal timelines in such presentations, but we can discuss offline.
Okay.
It is a roadmap item, will happen soon.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So what's the recommended lifecycle management for pipelines? Do you recommend having development, test, and production factories, or do you manage states somehow in one factory?
So we have actually a complete pattern published on how you can do continuous integration and delivery, which you're asking right now with Data Factory. So here, basically our pattern is that you have, actually we have a good visual over here that kind of showcases that. So here, in order for you to do continuous integration and delivery, our recommendation is that you have a Data Factory per environment. As you can see on the right-hand side, you have a Data Factory for dev, for test, and prod. And for you to use this continuous integration and delivery pattern that we recommend, you need to enable the Azure DevOps Git integration in the backend. Because once you do that, what happens is, let's say you have the Git enabled and you have different developers working in their different feature branches and developing code. Once they merge that into the collaboration branch, which is generally master but can be any, and they click publish, that's when we have an Azure DevOps release that you can define that gets triggered. Because behind the scenes, we're going to create an ADF_publish branch in your Git, and the trigger in your Azure DevOps release is looking for that branch. The moment it gets created, the trigger fires, and it takes whatever is in your dev and moves it to the test and then so on to the prod environment. And because this is a workflow, you could have different steps that between environments, if you want to add test to that, you could do that. It's a lot of information, so I would highly recommend to look at this particular documentation. And here we actually publish a pattern as well. Like we have a sample deployment template on how to use and how to get started and how you can enhance it, some of the common questions that we keep on hearing from customers regarding continuous integration and delivery. So just go through this. If you have any follow-ups, just reach out and we'll be able to help you. Yeah.
So I see that within your data factory pipeline, you had a web activity that was doing a send email notification on failure. Mm-hmm. Is there any plans on having any built-in capabilities to send failures on the activity base rather than at the pipeline level?
So if you think about it, it's an action, right? Like if we want to enable it, it's an activity that we want to enable first class. Right now, if you look closely, and if you're familiar with Data Factory, I'm using a web activity to do that because behind the scenes, I've created a logic apps workflow.
Which is what we're doing. So
yes, which I call. And we are working, it's a roadmap item for us where we're going to introduce a first class email action activity. And once we do that, you can use it in any pipeline out of the box. So we have plans to do that in the next 6 months.
Thanks.
Yeah, and by the way, just to add what Gaurav mentioned, we have the Azure Monitor integration, and you can use metrics and alerts there on failures to send emails and alerts.
Yeah.
If we built a large library of jobs in Informatica, will you be offering something similar to what you do for SSIS or migrate some of those into ADF?
I did not understand the question. Can you come on the mic, please?
Similar to what you're doing with SSIS legacy jobs, if we've built a large library of jobs in Informatica and other legacy tools, will you be offering the ability to migrate or move some of those into ADF?
Great question. So absolutely yes. We are now seeing some of our partners, they have built tooling that migrates Informatica packages into ADF. And what we earlier mentioned, like when Gaurav was going through the transformation list, if you saw the transformation list, it kind of maps very similar to what Informatica or other more legacy tools provide, right? So if you have Informatica packages, Informatica mappings, we have partner ecosystem who are building tools to migrate over those into Azure Data Factory.
And in terms of mapping, we have close to 90% of the mappings that Informatica has. But the last 10%, we are looking for your feedback, right? So if there is a particular mapping that you're using in Informatica that you think is not available in the mapping data flow that we have, we would absolutely love to work with you to understand what it is and enable that over here, right? So we're looking for that feedback from you in the preview that we have.
Can ingestion pipelines be reused for different applied uses? So if I have analytical needs for SQL Warehouse, or if I have operational needs for APIs off of Cosmos, can I leverage different pipelines for different applied uses?
Right.
Yes. So essentially, I think everyone heard the question. So can I reuse pipelines or not? And that's exactly the point on why we enabled templates for you. Because if you look at this ingestion pipeline, what I can do over here is I've configured it with a particular Dynamics connection, with a particular SAP connection, but I could save this as a template as well. In order for me to save it as a template, I need to enable a code repo. But once you enable that, what it's going to do is it's going to create an ARM template out of it along with a metadata file and save it in your Git repo. And then you can essentially instantiate that template with different connection values, right? So think of it as a function that you can instantiate with different values. That's the whole point. We have enabled this template gallery for you. So if I were to just show you the template gallery over here very quickly, so you can essentially start your pipeline from templates. And this is the template gallery where we have a bunch of copy templates. So once you save your pipeline as a template, there's a My Template section that gets enabled. Now, anyone who has access to your subscription or within your organization will be able to see that and use that as well.
So would that be duplicating data in the lake then?
No, so it depends on the connection that you're providing, right? So once you save that as a template, we are not saving the connection, right? So once you instantiate that template, then you're asked for that connection information. So if you're going to give the same connection information, yes, it's going to copy the same data. If you instantiate with a different connection info, it's going to use whatever you provide.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Can you use the template to mass produce staging loads? Like, for instance, you have 200 tables in a business system or something. And today we use BIML to mass produce them quickly, according to some kind of loading pattern. Is it possible to recreate that in here?
So that's the whole point of having ARM templates behind the scenes, right? Because BIML is that language that allows you to create all of that on the fly, right? Your SSIS packages. So with Data Factory, the templating language that we use is the ARM templates, is standard across every Azure service. So you can absolutely write your own ARM template, enable that, and achieve whatever you just mentioned.
Yes, but can you?
Yeah, by the way, just to add to what Gaurav is saying, you can also templatize a pipeline, right? Like you can have a combination of lookup for each copy and do exactly what you're saying. Like you have thousands of tables on a source system. You want to copy all of that table, but you do not want to have thousands of activities. So what you do is we have a pattern that we have published with a lookup that looks up the table, identifies all the tables in the source system. Then for each will go iterate through everything and you would copy all of that. So you have a single pipeline with a for each activity, with a lookup activity and a copy activity that allows you to do exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, so you can see over here that I have such a template. So I have a for each, and in this case, essentially, I have a copy activity. And for the for each, I essentially I can pass the data through a lookup activity that I have in the general section, where I can essentially go in, do a lookup against different data sources and pass that as an input to this for each. So imagine the lookup returns a list of tables that you want to copy that gets passed to this for each iteration loop. And then inside the for each, you have a copy activity which does all that copy.
Yeah, time for one more question. By the way, we also have an Azure Data Factory booth at the expo. Please come over there if you want to have any deeper discussions. We are going to be there. Yeah, last question.
So what's your pricing model for the lift and shift for SSIS? Is it a consumption-based model, or is it dedicated pricing for as long as the integration runtime is running?
Right. So it is a dedicated model for the time the integration runtime is running, right? But again, this is a deeper discussion question, so you can please stop at the booth and we can have more discussion. Thank you so much, folks. It was great talking to you about Data Factory and presenting all these capabilities. As I mentioned, we will be at the booth. Please come over, stop by, and we can have deeper discussions.
And I just want to mention one last thing. If you guys want to be part of the Wrangling Data Flow limited preview that we have launched, you can just go to ak.ms Wrangling DF Docs. And here in this, we have this link to sign up for the private preview for the Wrangling Data Flow, which allows you to use Power Query Online as a step for doing data preparation in your pipeline. So feel free to sign up and we'll give you access to play with it. Thank you so much.